Danny Glicker is the Emmy-nominated costume designer for the limited series Angeline. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby, and I wanted to start off by asking you, Danny, in terms from a costume perspective, how did you turn or help turn Emmy Rossum into Angeline?
That's a good question. So, part of it was, we got a kind of a crash course in all things Angeline, because we started by recreating all the key art that then had to go into art department, billboard zone, headshots, yearbook photos. So basically I had a huge scope of actual Angeline images that I had to recreate. So I went into these fittings with Emmy that were really fun, and I just did the very best I could to exactly match these iconic key art moments. And then through that, we really began to do the body work, the kind of proportion work, because whenever you do a biopic, the actor that you're working with usually has different proportions than the character that they're playing. And I'm not talking about just body shape, but I'm just talking about like how things hit in a photo. So, if you're doing a simple pose, the arms might just not land on the same spot. So we were doing this really intricate posing work and body work. And it was actually really fun because I think Emmy and I kind of like locked in this kind of like deep connection because we were so on the same page. So I would have the actual photos that we were recreating, and then we would like massage and gently like push visually Angie with Emmy's sort of rehearsal body, because in all my fittings, I gave Emmy a rehearsal body that the clothes would fit on. And through the different eras, the body changes. So in each fitting, I would kind of build her up from era, starting with the least amount of rehearsal body to sort of the most amount of rehearsal body. So we would sort of start always younger and then end more present day, because there'd always be building up. And then once we use those key art sessions to develop the language of the body, the movement, and Emmy did so much movement work. So that helped me, recreate the clothes so well on her. Once we did all those key art moments, I then sort of had this extensive vocabulary in the language of the visual of Angeline. And then from there, those were my tools to kind of like go forth and create the world, which was in fact the entire show, which was very much our creation.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced, Danny?
Well, I think that the biggest challenge was also kind of like one of the greatest joys of the show was recreating the world over 5 decades, because I wasn't, I'm normally the biggest stickler for authenticity. And in this time, this is an entire series about highly unreliable narrators. And so my goal was never to only recreate authenticity. It was to recreate authenticity through the lens of people who are deeply invested in correcting the past, reinventing themselves, embellishing themselves. So I guess the biggest challenge was creating decades of Los Angeles history, but doing so through this like very glamorous Swarovski, hot pink, fluffy, marabou feather, Barbie, Marilyn sort of aesthetic. That is, of course, like, the hot pink Angeline world. So I really viewed this challenge, which was hard every day, jumping from decade to decade, but doing so through this like very glamorous lens, which was incredibly liberating. And, in my partnership with Emmy, it was sort of like creatively like exhilarating.
And you're right, like it is a show where you've got unreliable narratives, and sort of, the question of who Angeline is almost like we get different perspectives on that throughout the story. For you, what like was sort of maybe the through line or the truth of the series through all these different perspectives and different eras as well?
I thank you for asking that. I love that question so much. I'm actually getting a little emotional. because at the heart of it, for me as a costume designer, it's very rare to be able to tell a story which is so much about artifice and aesthetics that is all in service of one thing, which is the truth of this character. So, the whole, I think, thrust of the series for me, and it was very clear when I read it, I remember the first thing I thought, I was like, this is a show about hyper self-actualization. For all the kind of like unreliable viewpoints and vantage points, what we're really getting at here is someone who is using kind of this fabulous perspective to tell a deep truth, a truth that is like genuinely born of their soul. And so for me as a costume designer, the ultimate goal was to say, how can I tell the truth about someone who is fabulously invested in creating an external aesthetic that ultimately taps into expressing a deeply felt truth to the world? And I think that that's always been the kind of like wonderful tension of how Angeline presents herself and people's need to kind of get the story. And I think she says it, many times in the show, but she's like, you want to know my life story, you're looking at it. This is it. This is the story I'm telling you. And so for me as a costume designer, I mean, that is a rare and unbelievably rich opportunity to just say the artifice of a human could actually tell you the most, like the most profound secrets and truth of them.
Mm. And as you say, there's a real aesthetic to this show, and in a lot of like the show does sort of hold a mirror up to, even current day celebrity culture and all those sorts of things. Angeline is someone very focused on aesthetic and got particular views on what sort of aesthetic she's wanting to present. And you as a costume designer also in your job has to be very focused on different aesthetics and different looks that are presented, and are probably quite need to focus on little details and exactly how you want things to present. Did this show and working on this show at all like sort of almost hold a mirror up to you and the work you do in terms of being focused on the way people look and are presented, and what messages that sends?
I mean, it's inescapable. I mean, of course, isn't everything a self-portrait, which is kind of like the ultimate question of the show. I will say that the thing about the show that I'll never be able to let go, like the thing about the show that touched me so deeply was, with the conviction of our, directors and with Emmy and with what I was required to do, it's rare for me to be able to tell, a serious story about someone who has an incredibly complicated emotional internal landscape, but in the language of the most fun materials on earth. I mean, so I got to engage this like deeply intellectual, emotional part of my brain that I'm sort of like always excited to engage. And then I got to use the tools. I would come to work every day, and my office was very well organized, but it was an explosion of feathers, Swarovski crystals, sequined fabric, tons of outrageously vibrant spandex. I mean, I would walk into this office and I knew that I would look around at these unbelievable materials, and it was my job to use every single one of those materials to build original costumes, to transform Emmy, to create the worldview of Angeline. And so for me, it was transformative in that I finally got to tell the sort of like intellectual, heady, probing stories that I'm usually so attracted to, but have so much fun, because in this case, the visually exciting fun part is also the truth.
Mm-hmm. What was the most sort of fun or your favorite costume from the series?
Emmy and I had a running gag, and it took me a couple of moments for me to get it. But I remember I was in a fitting with her, And I mean, not a fitting, I was getting her dressed. I would, whenever a costume is being established, I am in there obsessively making sure everything is perfect, earrings, rings, like, the way everything is tied. And so she put this on and she looked in the mirror and she goes, I think this might be my favorite thing I've ever worn. And then a couple of days later, we were getting her dressed again. And she goes, I think this might be my favorite thing I've ever worn. And I kind of felt like that too, because there was this total freedom to tell the story, because as outrageously as Angeline is presented, and she is an incredibly visually exciting person to look at, there's like no doubt about that. We were always doing it in the pursuit of truth, and in the pursuit of telling this character's actual truth. So a lot of times I felt like, this is it. You're literally dressing a Barbie doll every day. You have a human Barbie doll. Have fun, enjoy it, enjoy this moment. It's rare. And so, as for my favorite costume, it would be sort of impossible to come up with one, but I have a lot of affection for I love, there's a tricky thing we do when Angie's on the drive with Jeff. She sort of is kind of not at her best moment. And she's in a sort of typical present day Angie look, which is sort of a kind of like a fur coat that's seen better days with some sparkle in it, and a crushed velvet dress that's, a typical Angie shape. And then she walks into the party, which turns into this dance number. Her fur coat flies off, and we think we're seeing the same dress, but it's not. Angie has been transformed into her sort of like perfect state. And the dress has suddenly been cut in a little bit more flattering way. And instead of just these cheap hologram sparkles on it, it's now studded with Swarovski rhinestones by the genius who does all of Bob Mackey's studying, Rolando, who's fantastic. And she's covered in these beautiful rhinestones. And then she moves from that moment in the dance number to this Showgirl Bodysuit, which I call nude, but it's not really nude. It's all these sort of like neutral metallics, but she's not in any pink except for the very light pink of the ostrich feathers that are acting as these kind of hip bumpers as she's descending from the moon. And the idea is she goes from being her everyday real woman to the perfect Angie, to this kind of mood goddess, which is what I call that outfit. So as she's descending from the moon, even though it's all in silvers, I call it nude because the idea is that she's in her ideal state, presenting herself to the world as a gift in her purest form. So I love that transformation of 3 looks. She goes from kind of like everyday to ideal to goddess.
Well, now you are nominated for the Emmy for Outstanding Period Costumes, Danny. So congratulations for that. And the episode from the series that has been nominated or selected for your work is Glow in the Dark Queen of the Universe. What was special about that episode?
I got to be honest, I love all the episodes, but as I was looking at the episodes, I thought that Glow in the Dark Queen of the Universe was so jam-packed in terms of really showing Angie's look. We of course, we do see present day Angie, which is super important to me because I love present day Angie, but we see Angie and Earth Girls Are Easy. We see Angie at a hot seat with Wally George. We see Angie only for a moment in a very elaborately staged scene where she's judging a drag contest, where not only did we design, and this is in the 80s, so not only did I design a really fun outfit for Angie, but all the drag queens behind her were custom created for the show, including one of the drag queens wearing a child's 1980s toy Corvette that we turned into a wearable costume with the legs hanging out. Another Angie drag queen wearing a billboard, recreating the original Angeline billboard. And so we have so many moments in that episode that really connect to kind of like Angeline's journey, because I think Glow in the Dark Queen of the Universe is really showing her at the height of her 80s excitement. So we really sort of see this like go, go, go world of Angie. And it's not just her, it's the supporting characters. We see the world in this like really hyper vibrant experience where like I'm really pushing the background colors as well to really be this kind of like insane kaleidoscope of Technicolor that's designed to push her pink forward to really, because this is the moment she is most excited to be Angeline. So I guess that's the thing about the episode that I love, but I love them all.
There is, this is your first Emmy nomination.
This is my
I
first
believe.
Emmy
Yeah.
nomination.
So what does that mean to you? And you also got an Oscar nomination for your work on Milk. So how does getting an Emmy nomination compare to getting that Oscar nomination?
Well, I think that the Emmy nomination is really special to me. For starters, because this project is really special to me. This was not a gig. This was not some job. This was something that I felt every single day I came to work, like I wanted to bring my A+ game. My crew brought their A+ game, and I really wanted to do so because I wanted to tell this story about our cultural consciousness, our soul, where we are right now in the world. And I felt like if, the trip from Marilyn to Angeline to Kim Kardashian is a very, very direct line. Like we really see it. And I wanted to tell a story. Whenever I'm sent a period project, I always ask myself, how is it about right now? How is it deeply about what was happening, but how is it also about exactly right now? And this project really hit that for me. And then I think that the Emmy nomination is really special to me because we are in an age of television content where the onus on high production values has never been higher. I turn on television now and I see the quality of work that is indistinguishable from the best film work. And I think that as a costume professional, it's so important to me to be able to go to where the most exciting story is and to sort of like be able to blur the lines and to no longer have those kind of like marginalizations of I only do blank. I think that right now, because film is obviously something that I love doing. And I also really love telling exciting stories and Peacock was a network that was telling Angelyne, and that was the story I wanted to tell. So getting the Emmy nomination is really moving to me because it means that this kind of investment in doing this kind of heightened, high quality production value-based work is going to be acknowledged and seen. And I love that. I love that for the industry.
When I finish talking with you, Danny, I'm going to be talking with the Emmy-nominated team for the makeup of the show. Do you have do you have a good question for me to ask them?
I mean, they did such a fabulous job. I had to dress a body that was not an actual human body. I remember there'd be times when I would be adjusting Emmy's costume because it was actually a really big learning curve. Things don't stay. They use the most beautiful materials. And I would definitely talk to them about getting the skin-like texture. And we really worked very hard to get not just the right form, but the right texture, the way clothes sit on it. And I would be adjusting her body. And there'd be these times when, whenever I'm adjusting anything on an actor's body, I obviously am going to be incredibly respectful. And so I would go up to Emmy, I would adjust a costume and I would say, I'm sorry, I'm going to touch you right now. And she'd say, Danny, you realize this is my body, right? I can't feel anything. But I would forget. Their work was that beautiful and their body was that beautiful. And I think one of the reasons was they were really committed to telling the truth. I think that in order to tell the story of an icon, of someone who sort of like is bigger than human, our dedication was human. Our whole commitment was human scale. So I would definitely ask them about kind of their commitment to the way that they created their body that behaved like a human body in clothes, because unlike a lot of body work, our body is not covered up. I've done a lot of body work where we then cover it up in clothes. This body had nowhere to hide, and they did such beautiful work.
Yeah, oh, it's fantastic. Well, Danny, thank you so much for spending some time chatting with us today. Congratulations on the Emmy nomination.
Thank you.
All the best of luck for the upcoming Emmy Awards. And
Thank
people
you.
watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to make their own awards predictions and discuss the Emmys and TV in the forums. Thank you so much, Danny. Have a great day.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.